Okay, on these questions you cannot use a graphing calculator. All of these polynomials we're going to graph here, 22 through 25. First thing I want to do is determine, since these are in factored form, I want to determine the leading coefficient so I can figure out the end behavior. For this first question, you have negative x squared, you have x minus 2, and you'd have x plus 4 to the third power, so it'd be x plus 4 3 times. The leading coefficient is the highest power of x, so if I multiply the first term in each one of these, that should tell me the leading coefficient. So this is negative x squared, this would give me x to the third, x to the fourth, x to the fifth, x to the sixth. So it's negative x to the sixth. So this is even because of the 6, and it's negative because we'd have a negative 1 as a coefficient. So even the two pieces of end behavior go the same direction. Always, if it's negative, it's going to go down. So the next thing I need to do is determine my zeros. So here I'd have a 0. This has a multiplicity of 2, so that's an even multiplicity, so that's going to cause a bounce. I have just a positive 2 here, no bounce of any kind, and I have a negative 4. This multiplicity is 3. If the multiplicity is odd, it goes through the x-axis. If it's even, that's what causes the bounce. So I'm going to plot these three zeros, negative 4, 0, and 2. And I'm going to remind myself that there's going to be a bounce, so I will not go through the x-axis where I touch 0. So the end behavior should be down, down, so I'm just going to sketch that on the far left and far right. Okay, this has an odd multiplicity, so I go through, but I have to come back down because I know I have to go through 0. This is squared, that causes a bounce, so I have to come back up, but I know I have to come back down because I also have to go through my 0 at 2. And this is just a rough sketch of the graph. Okay, leading coefficient here. No multiplicities other than 1 in this graph, and so x times x times x would give you x cubed. So this is going to be positive because this would just be a positive 1 out in front here, and odd. Positive odd goes down at the beginning and up at the end for its end behavior. So then you just have to figure out where you're crossing the x-axis, and that'll be your zeros. So negative 6, 3, and negative 1. So let me plot those points. Negative 6, negative 1, and 3. I'm going to draw down my end behavior down at the far left, up at the far right. All of these have odd multiplicities, so every time you're just going to go ahead and go through the x-axis. I know I have to go through 0, we're going to come back down, but then we know we have to come back up. So for my rough sketch, something like that. Okay, sliding down here. If you were to write this all out, you would have you'd have a negative, and then you'd have x minus 1, and then we'd have x plus 3, 5 times. I'm not going to write all that out. Yes, I am, real quick. If I do that, sorry, to get my leading coefficient, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 x's. So this would be negative x to the 7th. The negative is coming in front from the very beginning of the problem. Now, this is negative because of this, and odd because of the 7. That goes up at the end, down at the beginning. Okay, now here, I'm going to go through positive 1. This will have a bounce because of the second multiplicity. I'm also going to go through negative 3. Now the multiplicity there is 5. If the multiplicity is odd, you go ahead and go through the x-axis. So I'm going to go through 1, and I usually just put a little circle around that to remind myself that I'm going to bounce. The other place I'm going to go through is negative 3. So I'm going to go draw down on the far, oh, nope, I messed up my end behavior, sorry, up at the beginning, so up at the left, down at the end. Okay, for my odd multiplicity here, I'm going to go through the x-axis, but I know I need to come back up because I need to go through this 0, and then the bounce will come and bounce it right back down. Okay, no multiplicities on this. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. X to the 4th is going to be your leading coefficient. That's positive and even. Positive because we would just have a positive 1 there. Even because 4 is an even number. Even goes the same direction. Odd goes opposite directions. This goes up because it's positive, and then you're just figuring out where do you go through. So 0, 2, 5, and -6. So I'm going to plot those. 0, -6, 0, 2, and 5. Okay, up at the beginning and up at the end. Now, all of these are odd multiplicities, so every time I'm going to go through the x-axis, but I know I have to come back up to go through this, come back down because I have to go through this, come back up because I have to go through this. These are all just a sketch, but that's what you should have for all your graphing.